So ladies and gentlemen, we begin now with our Mindmine exchange. Over the past few decades, Indian companies with global footprints have rarely invested in brand building. Most of their business models run on B2B platforms. However, in the last few decades, we are witnessing a paradigm shift in this trend, with consumer-facing Indian firms increasingly keen to create brand equity outside their home domains. Our next session, which is a Mindmine exchange, can Indian companies build iconic brands? This will be a conversation where we will be exploring the brand journeys that Indian companies need to undertake in order to gain acceptance and credibility in developed nations. It's my privilege to welcome to the stage Ms. Jyotsna Suri, President, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. We also have Mr. R.C. Bhargava, Chairman, Maruti Suzuki India Limited, and of course, taking the Mindmine exchange forward is Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mindmine exchange. And in this session, we thought we should talk about brands, especially Indian brands. Over the last couple of decades, it's clear that India as an economy, individual companies, and India as an industry have moved forward, especially in the global arena. We've had many foreign companies come and set up operations in India. We've had Indian companies go out and acquire businesses overseas, as also set up businesses overseas. Business clearly is growing. And if you remember, the discussion we had yesterday was about India 10 years out. What is it we can hope to see? What is likely to be the India picture at that point in time? Will we, both within India and outside of India, see Indian brands getting the same recognition, the same positioning as some of the iconic global brands that we see across the world today? And that's the question we thought could be answered extremely well by the two panelists on my left and right, both doing interesting work in, of course, very different areas. They don't need an introduction, so I'm not going to introduce them. Jyoti in travel, hotels, tourism, and Kedo in automotives, building India's giant company, which is already an active exporter of products from India. In fact, this company moved India's automotive business into much more global style of functioning, pushing both quality to levels that India had never seen before, building scale that India had never seen before. And it's interesting that Maruti and Hero, which was then Hero Honda Motors, actually started in the same year and turned Gurgaon into a hub for automotives, where both half of India's two-wheelers and half of India's cars were actually being produced. It's been said, Oscar Wilde actually said something interesting about how you are and how you are seen. He said, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Because very often when we try and build brands, we start to emulate or copy others. And sometimes that copying is mindless. Emulating to do something better is absolutely fine, but blind copying sometimes is like cheating. And Indian entities, Indian businesses also have some of the Indian ethos built into them. It is also because the managements are Indian, their DNA is Indian, their philosophy and upbringing is the kind it is. So a question I was asking both the panelists outside is, could this be a reason that there have been no real global Indian brands built because we don't like to talk about ourselves? because it's actually not considered good form. It's not Indianness to talk about yourself and things you do. In fact, most big brands that have been built in the world in the last century, have actually been from Anglo-Saxon nations. Very, very few of them have come from other nations. Japan, of course, was an exception. We built some giant brands. It's also said that brand value is like an onion. You can keep peeling off layer after layer after layer of a large organization, and you see different parts of the organization from different places. You see different aspects of it. So Jyoti, I'll start with you. When Lalit left us, you had the possibility and an opportunity to just sell off this hotel chain and sit back comfortably and live the rest of your life. You would have been comfortable, your kids would have been comfortable. You chose to go out and not just run it, you really built it into a big Indian brand. So what drove you, and what is your belief in building brands in India itself?
Thank you, Sunil. Well, what drove me was the fact that I knew hospitality. I believed in the future of hospitality, travel and tourism in India. And all that Lalit had done, all the hard work that he'd put in to be able to build that huge kitty of hotels, I had to do justice to it. And I think the fact was that Indian hospitality had finally arrived. So where hospitality was something seen as an international brand, I think the Indian brands now are extremely strong. And as a matter of fact, we're actually doing a Lalit in London. And it's for the first time that an Indian brand is actually going to run on its own name. So it's not an existing hotel which has a name or a brand, but it is actually a new hotel, new in the sense that it's a 175-year-old building, which we are converting into a boutique hotel, and it's going to fly the flag of the Lalit in London. This just goes to show that hospitality in India, the hospitality industry has actually arrived. And I think a lot of the Indian brands are ready to be poised, and they are, as a matter of fact, going overseas and establishing themselves. One of the reasons that you did point out was that it is our DNA to talk less about ourselves. That could be right, but the fact is that, we're very young as a nation of industry. The other nations have had a kickstart and a head start over us. What you said was that Indian brands overseas, my answer is not yet, but definitely the future shows that there will be a large number of Indian brands that are going to go global and establish themselves. I'm absolutely convinced on that.
So Kedo, it's brand experts always say, it's not about the spit and polish. It's not about cleverness. Brands are much deeper and much more than that. Indian companies have shown depth. Why do you think they have never invested in actually building these brands, or at least making them visible to the lay public?
Sunil, I'll of course confine myself to the manufacturing sector products and brands.
You don't need to. Please feel free to go beyond that.
Because I'm not knowledgeable enough about Jyoti's areas to comment on that. You talked about the brands being from the Western countries. But remember that the Industrial Revolution and the growth of industrial economies all happened in the West. Japan was a latecomer. They got their technology from the West, and then they grew, and then they built a brand. And I think that will happen now in China next, when you see some brands in future coming out of China. The handicap which we have in India is that in India, no government, till the present government, has ever recognized the importance of manufacturing in this country. All the policies in these last 68 years have been directed, based not openly, but in effect, to ensure that manufacturing remained a second or a third priority activity in the whole economy. You cannot build a brand, firstly, until you have some locally developed products with a local brand name. Jyoti has done that in her business by renaming the hotel after Lalit. And I think that's the way to start building a brand, because if you build a business which is large enough and you build a standard of excellence which is for all to see, then that name and that brand will also get built. Of course, you have to talk a little bit about yourself. But in the manufacturing sector, I'm afraid we haven't developed products, we haven't built them to international quality, we haven't built scale. Sure, Euro is of international scale, but your product was developed with foreign technology. Maruti is now reaching international scale. We haven't reached there yet. But our product is also with foreign technology, and the company, in fact, today is a subsidiary of a foreign company. So these are not going to become a, Hero may become a brand in the future, I'm not sure. But Maruti cannot become a global brand because we are not a global brand. So, and I think that applies to the rest of Indian industry.
You raise an interesting point here, Kedo. It's not often that a sub-brand overshadows the mother brand. In your case, people are saying that Maruti is now in Suzuki's global scheme of things. In size, it's very significant. It's an important part of Suzuki's global footprint. Do you see the Maruti brand over any period of time becoming bigger than the Suzuki brand itself? Is that a possibility?
You know, if you look at the size of operations in India, Indian operations will certainly become larger than Japanese operations. There's no doubt in that. And that's the reason why Suzuki is paying so much attention to India today, because it knows the future of Suzuki Japan is essentially dependent on the Indian operations. The volume of Maruti branded cars which will be sold in the world, and world really means India in that respect, will be far larger than Suzuki branded cars. But the Maruti brand will remain an Indian brand in India. It will not go global.
So Jyoti, this session actually looks at India 10 years out. You said you stepped out and not just put your logo on that hotel, but you're actually going to run it yourself with no management contract, no global brand in there. 10 years out, is there a possibility for Indian services brands to be seen as global brands?
Definitely. I certainly think that the Indian service brands can go global and will go global. As Bhargava Saab pointed out, you have to have an environment, a conducive environment, and India did not have that conducive environment. And somehow industry services were always looked upon with a bit of diffidence. With the current environment and this boost, whether it's to manufacturing, whether it's to services, definitely the way forward is going to go global. And as for myself is concerned, this is going to be a Lalit. It is completely Indian. It is going to run with the Indian culture. Of course, it is international in its service standards, but it's an Indian brand. The door is going to be opened by a darban, pretty much like it is going to be like you had one here outside. And you will notice that it is an Indian brand, and perhaps I'm not going to stop there. I mean, if it does well, what is stopping me from carrying some more Lalits into the rest of the Europe? Sure. If I have an opportunity and if it's viable, I certainly will look at it.
So that leads to another interesting point here. Indian companies, when they go out, sometimes almost pretend not to be Indian. Certainly in the older days that used to happen quite often. Now with India being more open, more forward-looking, and clearly more progressive economically than it was 20 or 30 years ago, do you think the India Association is a positive? Should that be played up? Should that be played down? Or does it not matter?
You know, when we started exports, and this was towards the end of the 1980s, the perception outside India, especially in Europe, was that India as a manufacturing country, and especially of a technology product which was related to safety of the driver of the product, was not a reliable kind of country to look at, because our whole reputation was not of making quality products. We have improved a lot since then, but it is not yet something which we can say we are at global standards. And I think we have a big problem, Sunil, as long as we pose manufacturing versus agriculture as being adversaries, farmers and industrialists being adversaries, that either you benefit one or the other. I don't know when we will realize that industry and services and manufacturing and agriculture have all to work in harmony with each other for the benefit of each other if we are to grow as a nation. And we have to change the perception of what we are. I think what is being attempted by the government is in those lines. But it requires a lot of work to be done at all levels and at all kinds of people to understand what's going on.
So could you describe your brand promise in a single line?
It's actually
Because what Kato is saying is you need to take out the confusion. Clearly, that's the message.
between Indian brands and international brands.
No, the confusion about when you go out, as a nation, we are still a bit confused. At least we appear confused from the outside, that we are not quite sure where we want to go.
Sunil, I
And
don't think it's
internally,
that's true in the services sector that much. The confusion is more on the manufacturing sector.
Yeah, I was going to come to that. I think as far as the services sectors are concerned, I do not think there is any confusion about the stability or the validity of the Indian service sector. So I have I haven't met with a single question since it's been now 3 years that I've been developing that hotel. I've had the best guys working for me, and they're all excited about the Lalit brand. And they're looking at the Indian hospitality brand as something to look forward to. So services sector there is no confusion. However, I would definitely say that unless, and I completely agree with what Bhargav Sahab has just said, that unless we all look at agriculture, manufacturing, services, every single aspect as one and not as adversaries, India cannot grow as a nation. And I think that's something that we all, as Indian citizens, have to work together. So it's not just about the political will sitting in the government. They are doing what they can, but there are so many other things that are happening, and we are all witness to that, which are perhaps not allowing it to happen. So as responsible citizens, I think we all need to put our foot down and say, we all are one nation. We are not anti each other. If there is going to be land acquired, it is not because you're going to take away somebody's birthright and not give him anything, but perhaps you're giving him an opportunity to work, or his children to work somewhere else. Maybe they don't want to be farmers anymore.
Good, that's good advice. Kato, can you answer that as well? What is your brand promise in as short a message as possible? What do you think people understand as a brand promise?
People look at a brand as a guarantee of a certain degree of quality and performance. Whether if they go to a Lalit hotel, they expect a certain degree of hospitality and service. If they buy a Maruti car, they expect a certain amount of value for money. If they buy a Hero motorcycle, they expect a certain degree of value for money and reliability. I think that's what brands are about, that it's an assurance of what you're buying.
We actually had an interesting experience, as you know, when we transitioned from Hero Honda to the Hero brand. We got some very interesting recognitions for what was done then. We got an award for the fastest brand transition ever done in India. We got a second award for the most effective brand transition ever done in India. So it kind of begs the question, because there are many, many others who actually also have good brands. Is there more we can do to actually build the brand, not just as a business, but outside of the business with our connect with the community and society? What role does that play in your brand? Because you do lots of stuff. I've seen in Srinagar, in Goa, in all kinds of places you're doing things.
True. As a matter of fact, we don't develop hotels. Our brand takes pride in saying that we develop destinations. And when I say destinations, I don't mean create new destinations, but the people of the destination are the people that we engage with. And we therefore pick up the local culture, we pick up the local sport, and engage the local people with us so that they feel part and parcel of us. And that is really helpful because everyone around in the hotel, particularly in the smaller resort areas, I'm not going to go with the metros because that's a different ball game, but when you go into resorts or you go into a place like Kashmir, and if every shikarawala speaks nicely because I have been engaging with them to do a shikarathon, or if I go to Gulmarg and I do a pony race for them, so they all know me as somebody who's there to help them out, not take away anything from them. So you start building the confidence of the people, and the destination begins to get alive. It gets noticed. The politicians notice it. Sometimes they come there for the first time because I'm doing an event and they realize the roads are very bad, so maybe they try and do something about the roads. So it is what we say, developing a destination, not just a hotel. So I'm doing my little bit in my own way.
We'll open to the audience for questions. So can we get a mic down there, please? And then to the lady at the, yeah.
Ashu Sagar, don't you think the brands develop only when you are producing enough to go beyond the locality where people can see or they already know about what you are selling? There's competition enough to identify your product from the other products. And so till we in India...
that's fine. The question is okay. Let them up. I'm trying to keep them short so we can get a few more in. So that's it.
Okay, fine.
Thank you. Kedo, you want to take that?
No, you're right. As I said earlier, unless you make products in large numbers, you make them of the right quality, you be consistent in your quality, you can't become a brand anyway.
Sir, I am Commander Suri. I would like to ask the private industry in India. Now, can we have a promise Can we have a promise from you all that we produce the first best brands in the world in next 5 to 10 years? So far, I take the success of Indian products abroad very proudly. I am a proud Indian. But I am asking internationally, staging at number 1, number 2, number 3 like this.
Thank you. Can we get the mic back? Yeah. Just a minute.
You know, there are not so many Indian manufactured products selling abroad in large volumes anyway. And I don't think anybody can give a promise it's going to happen in the next 5 years. It's not going to happen because Indian products need to be developed. If you have a product which is from a foreign company, which is foreign technology, maybe a foreign subsidiary working here, that product is not going to get you a global brand. The global brand will be of that foreign company. So when will we be able to develop actually Indian products in the manufacturing sector? Unlike the services sector where they have developed products, whether it's Lalli, where it's Oberoi also, it's an Indian product. But in the manufacturing sector, we don't have any product of any scale, volume and quality which has the potential in the near future, 5 years, to become a global product.
5 years is a very tall order. I don't think anyone can make that promise.
So just an addition here. Incidentally, our new products are being developed now completely by the company since we bought Honda out of the company. And in terms of scale, the company is already the largest in the world. So there is an opportunity here to build something global, but it will take some doing. That's clear.
My question to the panel is, we're saying we don't have manufactured, brands and products in scale globally to build a global brand. My submission is slightly different. Even in the services sector, when we look at Infosys and stuff, and I've done work on some of that, barring TCS, none of our service brands really stood out as an Indian brand that had value in the global market. But Hero being a case in point, why can't somebody take the lead and build pride in a brand built in India. I think there's an opportunity.
So that is the attempt we're making, as you're probably aware, because this has been in the media. One of the things we've done as a company is constantly engage outside of just the product and the service of the product, with sports, with other community activities. We've now started taking global icons as brand ambassadors of the company, including people like Tiger Woods, and we've done this for a while. The attempt is actually to get the message out, but the message only can go if the product is going out. So we're being very careful how you take this message out. First, the product goes out, the product experience goes out, and then the message goes out. And we try and ensure the serviceability is established before the product gets to any place. So it's a very interesting puzzle. And we are attempting to do this in a very, very short time. I'm not sure many other companies across the world have done this in the kind of time that we're attempting. We've gone to 22 new countries in the last 2 years. We plan to go to 30 new countries in the next 3 years. So it is a very intense piece of work that's going on. The result, of course, will only be visible after another 5 to 10 years. But all of the building blocks are being put in place. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Natalie Obiko-Pearson from Bloomberg News. I have a question for the automakers on the panel. In the context of Make in India, there's this hope that building a manufacturing base here, which your industry is an example of, could create a lot of jobs in the future. And yet globally, you see a trend towards automation and manufacturing. I assume your own industry, the number of workers you use per unit has dropped over the years. What implications does that have for India going forward? Is Make in India, a manufacturing base, really going to create the jobs that the country needs?
I'm glad you asked that question, because it's a very widely held misconception that the jobs created by manufacturing should be evaluated only on the number of people working in the manufacturing factory. In fact, much the larger number of jobs are created once the product has been manufactured and is sent out into the marketplace. You mentioned the automobile sector. Even if I do not increase a single job in the factory, but I send out 1.3 million cars every year, roughly 1.3 million cars will generate some 800,000 jobs every year. Now, those jobs are entirely dependent on that number of cars going out from the factory and being sold and bought by customers. So it's the job of the manufacturer to constantly give greater value to the customer, and the higher the value I give to the customer, the more vehicles will be sold and the more will be the jobs created, although technically those jobs are counted in the services sector. But those jobs will cease to exist or be created if the car were not produced and sent out. The same thing applies to your motorcycles, applies to a whole lot of consumer goods, that unless the products are created with value, the jobs will not get created.
So these are indirect jobs as well that you create, because there's a lot of ancillary units that come up because of the supply that they give to you. So directly you are giving a job. However, there are many ripple effects and jobs created indirectly.
Absolutely. In fact, there are two parts to this. One is the large companies do not create all the jobs. In spite of automation within manufacturing, the overall number of jobs will actually continue to go up as you grow manufacturing. First, because the overall scale of manufacturing will go up. And second, because of the manufacturing related other activities, ancillary activities, which will kick in. And so as a mission for India, it is not just relevant, it is actually essential right now. Right up front, please.
So I have quite a direct question. While I know Hero is one company, but which are the other companies we can look in India which can create a brand? And I have a follow-up question. Like, we know like the product is very important, but what are the 3 other things which are very critical when they have to create a brand?
Of course, product, the quality of the product, the consistency of the product. That means there should not be, if you pick up a product from the shelf, it should not be different over time. It should remain. the ability to keep improving the product over time with new technologies and better practices in manufacturing. And of course, the advertising and the brand building activities which are required. All of those required to be done. But you will never support the last part, which is advertising and the brand building activities, unless you have good quality products available first.
So we'll take the last two questions, please. And there's one student at the back, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Munjal, this question is for you. And as an industry, part of the industry, we all appreciate the phenomenal brand transition which your group has done from Hero Honda to Hero, and we really appreciate the kind of speed in which it was done. Could you share with the audience what were the couple of initiatives which you took which really resulted in this such an effective change and such a fast change? Did you tweak with your brand promise? Did you talk of the product? Did you talk of the experience? Did you talk of the association? What are a couple of things which you did, which I mean could be a learning example for all others to emulate probably?
So there are two parts to this. One is the physical part of what got done. There was almost like a war room operating for months in order to ensure that on the 15th of August, one day, at every single consumer touch point, the brand was changed. Every one day. I'm not sure this has been done very often. And as you know, our number of touch points actually is very, very large across the nation. Then, of course, the physical thing, because when you go into the detail, it's the amount of work required is quite immense, actually. Right down to your visiting cards, your letterheads, your invoices, gate passes, every single thing had to change on one day. So it actually took almost an army of people involved, both inside the company and a series of them outside the company who actually worked on this. So that was the physical part. Second one, which is the brand promise, was actually consistency. That while it's changed, nothing has changed. That was the real promise, that the products will continue to be as good, our service will continue to be as good. In fact, what he said, it will not continue to be as good. Our attempt will be to make it better. And I'm not going into the actual word, but that was the implied message in the transition. And if you see, pretty soon after the transition, what we gave out as ads showed high technology is possible from an Indian company, Indian brand, Indian product. The best quality of service is possible from an Indian product, Indian company, etc., etc. So that was a real promise. And we're actually very, very fortunate that it worked so quickly. And brand studies, both before and after, showed that the perception of the brand is almost identical. That it's seen as an Indian company, is seen as a caring, even earlier, by the way, I'm telling you both. It's seen as a caring company. It's seen as a company which knows how to keep a promise, is traditional yet modern. It's an interesting study which came up, which spoke more of the value system than of the product itself. And I think that's what we managed to do, to continue to give the comfort to the consumer and the suppliers and the market, that the promise which stands behind the company has not changed.
May I add a word to what you said? I think what also was most important was that after Honda left this company, the products which kept going out into the market, the customers found that in terms of quality, in terms of performance, they did not change at all and they kept improving. And I think the brand was sustained because what you said you would do actually was happening in the ground.
May I just share with you what happened when we became the Lalit? We also, at the stroke of midnight on the 18th, because the 19th November is Lalit's birthday, we had 8 hotels then, now we've got 12. At the stroke of midnight, we changed every single hotel's signage, collaterals, visiting cards to the Lalit. And the people who were staying in the hotel, if they had left the hotel at 11 o'clock in the evening, when they came back at 12:30, everything in their room was changed to the Lalit. Again, I needed an army of people. It took me 1 year to plan this. And we changed our greeting. So the people who came in from that moment onwards were greeted with a namaskar. There was no good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. It was a namaskar. And that actually brought a very, very visible change. And we defined ourselves, funny that he defines Hero Honda exactly in the same way, but our tagline is traditionally modern, subtly luxurious, and that is what makes us distinctly Lalit. So we don't say we are the best hotel chain in the world or we've got the best rooms in the world. We just say we are traditionally modern because our roots are firmly in the ground in India, but we're extremely contemporary in our outlook. And our luxury is very subtle, and it depends on how you, my customer, defines luxury. And that's what makes us distinctly Lalit. And that's the Indian brand that we're talking about very proudly.
So did some people think they walked into the wrong hotel when they came in after half an hour?
No, they knew they walked into the right hotel because the aroma was exactly the same, except that they were greeted by a namaskar instead of a good evening. And the signages had become the Lalit. I mean, people were amazed at how did we do this. And we did this all in a matter of 5 minutes. It started at 11:55, and by 12 o'clock it was over.
Fantastic. So one last question. I wanted to ask one, but I think we shall have a student ask a question.
Namaste, and good morning to all of you. I am Gautam Shah, a student of BML Munjal University. I personally believe every brand starts with one thing: value can be created on the values. Indian companies do not speak that much of values. That's why they are not able to create that much of value on that. What's your take, sir?
I'm not quite
Just
sure
one more
what
thing I would like to add.
Huh.
Maruti does not put a logo on the car nowadays. It's just Suzuki logo in front of Zen, Estilo, or whatsoever it comes. Why we do not?
Because it's a Suzuki subsidiary. It's not a separate company. It's part of the Suzuki global setup of companies. It's owned 56% by Suzuki. And so they're putting their logo on it. They did not change the brand when the transition took place from a government company to a Suzuki subsidiary because they found that the Maruti brand as such was so well established that changing the brand would have been detrimental to the sale and the growth of the company. And so the Maruti brand was maintained, but a compromise was made to the extent that because it's a Suzuki company and normally the product would have been called Suzuki, they just put the logo on the car. That's it.
So as far as the values are concerned, I actually don't agree with you at all. I think Indian companies have way more values than a lot of international companies. Most of us work with very, very strong values, and I know Hero does, and I know Maruti does, and I know we do, and so do many of my colleagues in the hospitality industry. So there are plenty of values that we have, and we don't deter from them.
Thank you. This one, that's it. That's it. There's one thing we did not discuss at all in this session. When we talked of acquiring company, there are many who have gone global by acquiring brands as well to build global brands. So we didn't get time to do that, and we are closing now. But that's also something to think about, that there are different ways of building brands. And one of the quick ways that many companies have found is to go out and acquire an entity which has a well-established brand and then go on and build, further build a business on top of that. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much, Mr. Bhargava. Thank you, Jyotsna. That was a wonderful session, very interactive and very useful. Thank you.
It's been an inspirational and insightful Mindmine exchange. Let's have a round of applause for all our esteemed panelists. And I'll request Mr. Munjal to please present mementos to Mr. Bhargava and Ms. Jyotsna Suri. Small gesture on our part of saying thank you for being a part of the 9th edition of the Mindmine Summit 2015. Absolutely brilliant. Everyone, a big round of applause, please. Thank you so much, sir.